Good morning. There you go. Close enough. It's 9:30. I'll give you that for free. That's fine. Happy day 2, and welcome back to eCampus Micro-Credential Forum. Y'all. I know there's folks here today who were not here yesterday, so as a quick reminder, if you're looking for bathrooms, they're out the back there. If you're looking for the other, there's multiple concurrent sessions that'll be running today. The novella room is just in the back here, and the hall is on the first floor. And also, someone left a scarf here yesterday. It is lovely. If it's not claimed, I'm taking it, but if it is claimed, it's here. Now, I think I want to briefly just thank again the sponsors of this year's event. This has been fantastic, and it wouldn't be possible without you. The Government of Ontario, the Ministry of Colleges and Universities specifically, thank you very much for your support of eCampusOntario. FutureFit AI, thank you for your support of this work. CCI Learning, the Indigenous Institutes Consortium, ONCAT, Lightcast, and Pressbooks. This event wouldn't be possible without your support. And if you're interested at all in learning more about any of those organizations, they have booths out back there, and please take a moment to chat with them about the work they do and the work you do and what the intersection between those two things is. There's a phenomenal lineup of programming today. Where yesterday there was a lot of focus on where we are and where we're going. The today is so much about the how. There's so much depth in the work that's happening across this province and across this country in making an education ecosystem that works for employers, that works for learners, and that brings the best of what our institutions do to the forefront and makes it relevant to those audiences. Please enjoy and please engage with these ideas and this thought leadership in a meaningful way. Ask questions. Be curious, be excited. There's so much cool stuff happening in this country, and I couldn't be more excited for everyone to engage with these ideas. Now, to kick us off for day 2, please welcome to the stage Hamoon Ekhtiari and Robert Luke. Hamoon's the CEO of FutureFit AI. Robert Luke is obviously CEO of eCampusOntario, and we're going to enjoy a kickoff fireside chat focused on shaping the future of work, harnessing technology to unite industry, education, and talent. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you so much everybody for being here for day 2. Yesterday was indeed a fantastic day. I learned a lot. I'm really grateful that we're able to come together and continue the conversations today. And thank you, Amrit, for being such a great host. We really appreciate the great work that you're doing on keeping us on track and on time. I'm really super pleased to be here today with my good friend and colleague Hamoon, who's the CEO, as you know, of FutureFit AI, but also the lead sponsor with the Ministry of Colleges and Universities of this event. So maybe that deserves a round of applause. So we're going to spend the next 30 or 40 minutes or so chatting a little bit about this thing you might have heard of called AI and what it means to education. But Hamoon, to get us started, I thought, it's a fireside chat. We should have an icebreaker. Catch my weather metaphors there. So let me ask you 3 rapid fire questions. Balzac's or Starbucks?
I don't drink coffee.
I don't know where to go from there. Okay, well, this is a risky one then. Napa or Niagara?
Niagara.
Okay, thank you. And thank you. Actually, yesterday, we talked a lot about the economics of place yesterday, and I can't remember who it was talking about, might have been Vincent Caron from CME, about Niagara as being one of those fantastic destinations or areas that has really done a good job of standing up a really resilient regional economy. Okay, last one. Maple or corn syrup?
Definitely maple, especially given what's going on in the world around us.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, thank you so much. We got that out of the way. That does deserve a round of applause. So let's talk a little bit about you. I'm really interested to learn a little bit more about you, your personal story and your journey and the FutureFit AI work. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this space and the organization as a context for our folks here.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much, Robert, for hosting all of us at this great event. Maybe as quick bit of context, it's interesting you mentioned Napa. I just was actually on a flight back yesterday from Sonoma, not to drink wine, for work. But it's what you mentioned around economic regions is maybe something we come back to because I think that's pretty central to the reality of where we are. But as quick bit of context for the group, on a personal note, I'm a immigrant Canadian kid. So I would have moved to the country, to Ontario when I was in high school, didn't know English at the time, had to figure out my own path to work and opportunity and education and skills. And equally, parents who were immigrants with skills, but whose skills weren't really recognized by the labor market, they had to figure out what their path to work and opportunity looked like. And so it's very much the problems and the questions we think about as a group here are ones that are deeply personal, and then spent most of my professional years, whether it was in management consulting or in innovation hub or in corporate enterprise, all around questions of future of work and skills. And eventually, this is now 4.5 years ago or so, came around to saying, my boss at the time at one of the large telecoms said, hey, there are a couple of jobs that could be promotions. Which one are you interested in? I went home, looked at all the jobs in the company. I said, I don't know if I want any of these. And so I quit at the offer of promotion.
Bold move.
I don't make very many smart decisions. Another example of not a very smart decision was I was living in Barbados for a couple of years, decided to move back.
I'm going to stop you right there. I don't see how living in Barbados is a wrong decision, particularly when we're about to have a snowstorm.
Decided to move back.
Oh, okay.
In January.
Okay. Then.
Now you have your answer. But then that came around to saying, look, there is a meaningful, if you think about the reality of the work we do in this space, it's fundamentally centered around what will the future of work look like? And that question, I think no matter what data you look at, for us at the time was transitions, whether it's the complexity, the magnitude, the scale, the speed of transitions for people in their jobs and careers was only going to magnify and grow through the roof. And that's how we came about thinking about what it would look like to build technology and AI in that space.
So 4.5 years ago, you decided that AI was a thing and built the company from that.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was saying to somebody, the most common question we got asked in 2024 was, did you add AI to your name in 2024? and it was there since the beginning. Yeah, I think at the time, we looked at some of the emerging technologies and said, for this problem, given the nature of it, which one of these technologies might be most relevant? And our view was AI was going to be it.
So good prediction. Just for the record, we have a lot of smart people at eCampusOntario, and we have some folks doing work on research and foresight, and they did a report. I think it was about a year in advance of the launch of Gen AI and about the rise of AI. So they would be like you, one of those future trendsetters, saying that this is coming down the pike. So that's a pretty interesting journey. Certainly picking up a lot from our discussion yesterday. The idea of getting, first of all, people into the country and participating in the labor market. I think that's obviously something we're all concerned about, and what skills people need in order to participate in the labor market. So let's kind of zoom out a bit then and talk about the global view, because you're doing this work across countries. And I'm really interested, as I'm sure everybody else is, that what are some of the trends you are seeing across the world with respect to things that we're talking about here, labor market participation, the importance of skills, the use of things like AI to accelerate those connections.
Yeah, and maybe just as quick bit of context, the work we do now, all of our work is focused around the intersection of technology and workforce development. And so just to bring that to life a little bit, traditionally where we would have seen a lot of technology built would have been things like HR technology that's used inside companies to help their people and manage their people. And then traditionally there has been a lot of education technology, EdTech. So HR tech and EdTech, education technology used inside schools and inside colleges and universities to, again, manage students. Our thesis and hypothesis was there is an in-between that needs a lot more infrastructure than it's ever had. We're going to have a lot more people in transition than we're going to have people in place. So great, we need systems to manage students at a moment in time and manage employees at a moment in time, but so often people are in between, and that's what workforce development is fundamentally about. How do we build systems and infrastructure that can manage and support intelligently and scalably as people go through these transitions from education to work, back to education, to learning, to training. And so what do those systems look like? That work, built out of Ontario, now we do work across about a dozen states in the US. We do work in Europe, in places like Spain and Portugal. We've worked with Department of Work and Pensions in the UK, have done work in the Middle East. And that has started to give us a little bit of perspective on, and we see about 36 different workforce ecosystems around the world at a point in time, at any given point in time. What that starts to bring up is, what are some of the themes that you see coming through that are most common when these questions of, we've got a bunch of people that need help figuring out their path, and we've got a bunch of jobs that we need to fill because there are industries that have in-demand needs. I think maybe the three I would point to that most consistently come up. One is very central to obviously what eCampus leads in our world here and what the forum is about, but connective tissue between industry and higher education, but going beyond what has traditionally been one institution talks to 3 employers and tries to build those relationships manually. Because it's never gonna meet the scale of the challenge if we only rely on those manual individual relationships on the ground.
I'll plug that.
So what does scalable infrastructure looks like? Just to give you a couple of statistics, right? No matter whether you look at the McKinsey one, the World Economic Forum one, whichever report you look at, somewhere between, globally, 300 million to 1 billion plus jobs are gonna be disrupted, displaced, created in the next 5 to 10 years. We just do not have infrastructure to support that scale of transitions. And so what does it look like at scale to build connective tissue and pathways between higher education and employers? The second is a fundamental rethink and redesign of what we say when we talk about we're gonna put people through training. Historically, we've relied on what I call train and pray. Right? We train people and we pray that they're going to end up in a good opportunity somewhere someday, hopefully. And again, increasingly, whether you think about the reality of what the individual is asking our institutions for, which is, I need a real opportunity on the other side. It can't just be up in the air. What funders are asking for, which is, I got to see real outcomes or otherwise this isn't going to cut it. And the societal narrative, honestly, around where are we making our investments and for what results. We can't continue to rely on what was a presumed, I'll go through 4 years and have a 40-year career, and it's all gonna work out okay. And then I think the final piece is the question of cost, right? And I know you think a lot about this, Robert, in the work you lead in Ontario, but also across the country. We just somehow have kept not seriously asking the question of what is the true cost of getting a person from A to B successfully, and what are all the innovations that can happen around improving the ROI ratio, the quality of the outcome and the cost to deliver it. And a model traditionally that's been, let's just fund more programs to train more people, is actually never going to give us insights, data, and statistics on this question of what kind of pathways get what kind of people from A to B more successfully, more effectively, and efficiently.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, I would kind of boil that down to the connective tissue and the connectivity between the private and public sector. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But then you talked about time and cost. And I think those 3 vectors are pretty important for us to be talking about as we think about the role of micro-credentials in providing upskilling, but also the role of educational institutions in providing micro-credentials to people who are providing upskilling. I'm reminded of a t-shirt I saw somebody wearing when I was in college. I went to undergraduate in British Columbia. And, BC is far advanced than Ontario because I did 2 years in a college and 2 years in a university. It's kind of the air we breathed out there, and it was normal. Hopefully someday that will be the same here. But I saw somebody wearing a t-shirt in the college I went to that said, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. I think it might have been from the Body Shop, I'm not sure. Anyway, the point is that always stuck with me because I think it's true, and we're at a time. I just want to drill down on this piece about ROI because we're in a financial crisis in this province, in particular, and in this country, with respect to the educational system. Every day we're reading about programs that are closed or put on hiatus, and there's labor downsizing, layoffs, and that kind of thing. So pretty significant correction. And what in this case so what's the hope of micro-credentials that you think, or what's the hope of greater connectivity or compressing the time that is going to help the folks in this room do things differently to meet the educational needs that people have while also keeping the lights on? And I guess related to that, it occurs to me, and has occurred to me before, that I'm somebody who spent 30 years in higher education, and I think of education as a public good, but I think most people probably think of it as a private good. We're anomalous here. We probably all would agree that it's a public good. But in a world where most people think of higher education as a private good, how are we in this room, the people who are running the educational institutions, how best can we leverage the insights that you're bringing in order to future-proof our own organizations while we're future-proofing the labor market?
I often think about the analogy of calling an Uber, right? Imagine for a moment if you called an Uber, and here's how it went. The moment you sat in the seat, that was considered success. Just bum in the seat was considered success. Imagine for a moment if there was not high predictability of whether you would arrive at the destination. Imagine for a moment if you might pay a little bit or a lot, and there was no certainty around that. I think we fundamentally got to shift our thinking on this ecosystem from what has traditionally been a program, institution, provider-centric model to one that is about pathways, right? We are all enablers of pathways for people to get from A to B, and we need to figure out how we make it really clear for the individual what pathways are available to them, how they best and most effectively, with speed and effectiveness and efficiency, can get from A to B, and what it is that their destination is going to look like on the other side. I think on some of the questions you're bringing up, I think that's why the role of organizations like eCampus are so critical, because it ends up saying we're not about a single program that we're trying to sell to everybody there. We're about bringing the power of the collective to light up the many possible pathways somebody could take to opportunity. So I think one of the most important shifts we see is that move from what has traditionally been an inward-looking approach of my program, my institution, my organization, to one of, no, what really matters is how somebody can get from A to B. How are we all set up and redesigning ourselves to enable them best? And then when you ask the questions of public versus private good, maybe over drinks and for a discussion of philosophy, but what I'll speak to, rather than that in particular, is I think about what are the values we want our ecosystems to have. I think we want it to be accessible. Can anyone from any background at any point in time find an easy door in? And one of the things that's critical for that is for me to have something that can help me navigate, right? How do I know for who I am, what is available to me and where I can go? Why should I need to go? Imagine if you were booking a flight and you had to go to 20 different airline websites and you had to look at each of their individual websites inside a PDF document to figure out whether that's the right flight for you to take.
Isn't that why we have Expedia?
And so kind of what does that look like in this context? So I think that's one. Access is the first principle I think about. And how we optimize for access can take a bunch of different forms, and it can be funded both privately and publicly. I think the second is progress. We need to actually be able to consistently help people make progress. Why do we call it a 4-year degree if on an average it takes people 6 years to complete? That's the reality of the duration. That's how long it takes them. That's what we should be really focused on and optimizing. And then in a world where not everything can be binary of either a 4-year degree or nothing, we need a whole bunch of alternative progress pathways. I might just need a quick exit to be able to do a 12-week training program and get out, get a quick micro-credential that is industry certified, where I can immediately jump into a job. That's where I think on your question of power of micro-credentials, when designed well and when organized well, they can become those rapid pathways that people didn't previously have to real work and opportunity. So access, progress, and then I think that the third one, and for some reason I find us hesitant about talking about the question of efficiency. But I don't think that needs to be a bad thing. When we can be more efficient and doing one thing, we can do that thing for more people, and we can do 10 more things for other people. And I think we need to fundamentally ask the question of, if we take the 10-year view, what does it look like to 10x access and bring down cost by 50% per journey? Because that fundamentally changes what the ecosystem looks.
That's a really good point. I think yesterday we talked a lot about productivity, and the other side of the productivity coin is efficiency, I think, in some respects. And we are in Ontario doing a lot of efficiency reviews right now to try and figure out how, like, what is the cost of delivering, credential X into to a person. And I suspect that when people hear things like actual people like us hear, things like productivity and efficiency, we probably think, productivity is bad, but I'm working hard all the time. And what do you mean I have to do more with less? But what you were saying is it's really just about adoption of technology. In this case, like, how do we as a sector adopt technology like the tech stack that you're running through AI, or anything that's going to help us with greater throughput of people. Our tagline is we want to help people get into programs and into jobs, because at the end of the day, that's what people are doing, particularly with micro-credentials. So optimizing for efficiency, I think, is something, I guess what I'm hearing from you is we should not be shying away from that. In fact, we should be embracing it.
And I think to your point, I don't think the ask is how does everyone work 10 more hours in a day that's already packed? And I want to be clear, because I came into the world of technology never as someone who thought technology was the silver bullet, or as someone who believed entrepreneurship was the answer to everything. For me and for us, it's always been a problem-driven approach to the space. And so when I talk about efficiency, I'm talking about system efficiency. Our total ecosystem is highly inefficient in getting people from A to B in a way that makes sense for them and makes sense for everyone involved in getting them from A to B. And the ways to think about that can include technology, but my view is there is also all kinds of ways we can make the system more effective and efficient that doesn't include technology, right? One example of that is we gain significant efficiency when we don't ask every single individual program and institution to do their own individual marketing to the same people to say, come to my program. And we flip it around on a model like eCampus has done to say there's a common place for you to go discover all that's available to you, right? That can have technology play a role, but it's not the only one. But maybe to give you just a couple of examples of most efficiency is one dimension. I think overall is system optimization. And how do we make our transformer system to work, be radically more accessible, radically higher quality on outcomes, and radically more efficient. And all those three legs of the stools matter. State of Connecticut, for example, right? They had, for a long time, funded a whole bunch of job training programs. When they ran surveys, most people in the state didn't even know these programs existed. Money's already spent, there is not net new money being asked for, but the individual person in the state didn't even know more often than not that they had access to these. They were all run separately by separate institutions, whether it was universities, colleges, boot camps, and others. They all had to do their own management and outreach. There was also no data available on how people get from A to B and how successful they are. They essentially decided to bring it all together under one common umbrella, call it Career Connect, with a CT in Connect capitalized to represent the state.
Oh, that's good. The branders in the room, that's pretty right. Thumbs up on that one, yeah.
And they put centralized marketing dollars around this to just say, wherever you are in the state, this is where you go to get to opportunity. They pulled together 24 provider institutions under that common umbrella. Community-based organizations provide wraparound supports. Programs are already pre-funded. Clusters of employers are ready to hire across advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and IT. Within 18 months, 30,000 people have gone through a common assessment that profiles where they're coming from, connects them to relevant programs, and over 5,000 people landed in real jobs with real employers in the state.
Well, that's amazing. So is the brand. Hats off to Career Connect Connecticut. I find that a hard thing to say. That's a really, really good example, and I think the power, and thank you for the accolade. It is what we see. Steve Orsini is the head of the CEO of the Council of Ontario Universities, so I took this from him, so I'm citing him as the source, that the strength of what we can do is that we can collaborate to compete together. In the face of financial stress and diminishing international students, we have a couple of choices. We can decide to fight over diminishing returns in the pie, or we can grow the pie together. Obviously, we favor the latter. And yesterday, David from ESDC was here talking about the role of Job Bank. We have an agreement with the Job Bank so that anything that's listed in the micro-credential portal will be automatically listed on the Job Bank. And I was astonished to see that last year, 2024, they had 90 million hits onto their site of people, Canadian. I think you might have said that was aggregated for Canadian or segregated data for Canada. So 90 million times people were going in there looking for a course or a job. So I think that's the power of scale. And eCampus Ontario's micro-credential portal provides 80% of the micro-credentials for the Job Bank right now. And I'll just take an aside to do a commercial for us, that if anybody is interested, if you're one of our members and you don't have your courses listed, you should contact us. Somebody in your organization has the ability to add. We will put any course that you want on there, and we have AI tools that let you add labor market information. And if you're from another province, we're happy to work with you to give you that software stack in order to do the same thing in your province. We generated leads worth up to $30 million last year for our members, and that's not insignificant in a time of stress. So let's talk about time for a moment, because you talked about the time to degree and the 4-year degree taking 6 years on average. That sounds to me as extremely suboptimal from an efficiency perspective. I guess my first question is, why 4 years? And I was having a chat with somebody yesterday. Show me another industry that basically shuts down its physical plant for a third of the year and doesn't run programs all the time. Now, there's reasons for that. We have a 12th century model that got a software upgrade in the 18th century with the industrial kind of revolution and the need to have people farming and harvesting and that kind of stuff. We didn't get another software upgrade in this country until the 20th century, 1956. No, sorry, Michael Crow is here. It was 1913, the very first college in Canada, which I don't remember the name of, but Michael will remind me. It was in Alberta, I know that much. We haven't had a software upgrade since, is my point. And what I'm hearing from you is that it is high time to do that software upgrade. And while we're talking about time, we also heard yesterday that this is a moment in time. We have like a crisis piled on a crisis, probably piled on another crisis. It's not just the international student correction, which is probably the right thing to do, but has created a financial crisis. Now we're being trolled on a regular basis for tariffs. And we also heard yesterday from ESDC that upskilling and micro-credential learning is actually an effective tariff response, because we know that in times of economic contraction, people will go back to school. So I don't have a lot of questions in there other than observations about time, but let me turn that around, because you talked about 4 to 6 years. What should be optimal? Let's say somebody wants to get a degree. How can we be thinking about different ways that people can access courses, micro-credentials, credentials, and programs, but how should we be looking at the vector of time?
I think the simplest version of that, as you already pointed to, is it is kind of crazy to think of it binary, right? To tell people you either do this or nothing just makes no sense. It is not how they live their lives, and it's not how they experience the world otherwise. And so I think that the question then becomes, when you think about system redesign and reimagination of how we operate, one of our partners and backers and supporters is Juvo Ventures, which is the investment arm of WGU. The number of times in Canada I ask whether people have heard of WGU in higher education, less than 50% is the answer yes.
Okay, hands up in here. Who's heard of WGU? That's just decidedly less than 50%.
And I use that just as one example to say, because you're talking about the moment we're facing in higher education in Canada and in Ontario. And as someone who went through higher education here, right? Like I care deeply about, there was a time with the previous premier, I was involved in an attempt to set up a University of the Future, which is a whole other story we'll come back to, but that was 10 plus years ago now. I think I share that to say WGU decided to say, they now, just so you have a sense of scale, 250,000 people they've served. They serve over 100,000 a year in terms of people who come through their annual volume cycle. Just think about kind of comparative numbers in that. Fully run digitally in terms of its virtual access and online access. It is fully competency-based. You can start anytime during the year, and you can go as long as you see fit based on the milestones defined, and you can clear every milestone based on competency, not based on a time-based model. So I think when it comes to the question of time, the biggest assumption we have put into the system is we know how long things take. We don't. We don't, and we should not define value, success, or markers of milestones based on time. What we should do is to say, who are you? Where are you in your journey? What is your next goal? And what is the best intervention that helps you get to your next step in your journey? Sorry, very quickly, that intervention can go from, I just need in my job quick upskilling that might be half a day, to I need perhaps a credential or a degree, but it needs to be full spectrum. And the final thing I'll finish with, we just got to be nuanced about understanding not everything is also can be done in half a day, right? If I am changing careers and going into a new job, normally on average in the market right now, unless you're running something like full-time, 10 to 12 week program, you're not going to end up in a new industry truly meaningfully. You might just have picked up some knowledge, and that is the difference.
Yeah, the Western Governor University is a WGU example, I think is a very powerful one, and I think there's a lot of lessons there. I'm also reminded of African Leadership University. They have a model that's missions, not majors, that people come into those organizations not saying, I'm going to study this content, but saying, I've got this mission, I want to do this job of business or social innovation or entrepreneurship, and I want to orient my learning behind that, or around that, sorry. And it does occur to me, so talk about competency, we have a content-based system, right? Time is one of those vectors, but content is one of those vectors. Like I study this thing, but we don't actually, very few institutions here do competency-based education. Some do. La Cité College is a college here in Ontario that does an excellent job of that. Their entire curriculum stack was translated into competency-based, and I think that's a pretty impressive feat in and of itself. But like I've been an academic for a long time, or working in academic institutions. I've like had interactions with something like 8,000 students in my career. I have never once met a student who didn't want a job. I mean, maybe that student exists, I don't know, but I've not met them. And I know what you're thinking, well, what if they just want to be a student? Well, that's a job too, right? My job is to be a student. So, to unpack that content competency thing a little bit for me.
Similar to the time concept we talked about, we've assumed that content is how people learn. Again, kind of the most significant questions we need to ask is what are the most significant assumptions underneath our system? How do people learn? In a whole bunch of different ways, right? Put them into a real experience, which I know, again, a lot of you do with the programs you offer. Put them into a real experience, they're going to learn an incredible amount of things. Combine that experience with points of reflection that are meaningfully designed to actually really crystallize what did I do, what worked, what didn't, and what do I need to do differently. You've now materially accelerated that learning. And so what does it look like? I went to Waterloo, and so an institution that more heavily, at least at the university level compared to others, it traditionally has focused on that. What does it look like for us to design intentional experiences that start with what problem are you going to solve, and go find the knowledge and content you need because it's out there somewhere anyway. Ask your favorite AI, right? Like we have got to fundamentally shift away from a content-centric one to a problem-centric, challenge-centric, and experience-centric model of learning. And then I think the other piece we've shied away from, which again I know you think a lot about in the work and all of you in the work you do, is how do we really, really know? How do we know if they learned a thing? Right? And so what does true skill assessment in the long term at scale look like? We haven't solved that problem yet.
It occurs to me that what we're talking about is the difference between what I know and what I know how to do. Like at the end of the day, I want to translate my knowledge. It could be content knowledge. Content knowledge is useful. Skills knowledge is usable. It's making that content usable. Let's pivot a little bit, and I'll just give everybody a heads up. We'll move into questions in a few minutes. So if you've got some burning questions for Hamoon, there will be a microphone. Somebody, Serial Scotland, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. If you've got a question, let's talk a little bit about the connective tissue that you mentioned. And so we're really pleased to be partnering with you on our new venture, which is launching on Monday, the Campus Exchange. And we see that as, one of our roles is to kind of provide that connective tissue because we represent 53 Indigenous institutes, colleges, and universities, and we're trying to bring the power of scale to show the value of what that scale means to literally bring the campus into your company. So why is this effort important and why now?
And Robert, thank you to you and your team for your vision and leadership in this space. We're just happy to be a supporting partner of what is going to be hopefully an incredibly important initiative for the province and the country. I think maybe what I'll share is the experience we have working with employers. Because we're not focused on pure education, we're focused on this workforce connectivity of someone getting the skills they need to get to a work opportunity. We spend a lot of our time with employers. Employers on our platform, we get to see their jobs, we get to analyze them, extract skills, understand what they're looking for, drive matchmaking, all of that in the data and the technology. But when I sit down with employers who are doing this work and wanting to work with organizations like those that both eCampus represents and in this room, they are underwater by the number of people who come to their door, knock on their door and say, work with me. And they get that all day, every week, all the time. And they have no way of being able to understand who are you, what do you offer, how is it useful to what I'm looking for. Oftentimes what's said to them is focused on what the organization has to offer rather than what problem it's solving for the employer. And so I think that the work, the initiative that you'll be fully announcing on Monday, the power of it is starting from the employer perspective and saying, how do we understand the set of needs you might have, organize that into a menu, and then map that menu using data and technology over to all the great offerings that are available across the ecosystem. And so it makes it much easier for the employer to understand whatever I need, there's an answer for me here. It becomes a go-to place for them. It then matches and we can provide insights together over time to say, hey, higher education, here's what they're asking for. Here's where the gap in the provider marketplace is. This is an opportunity for you to jump in and offer something new. And then finally, when we drive more and more of the match between employers and providers, we together will have insights on what kind of solutions, what kind of offerings work best for what kind of needs for which industries, the kind of data and insights that we just haven't had. So I think that's the power of this, both for Ontario and hopefully over time nationally.
Thank you. And I would say also the power of the partnership that we have formed in order to bring this to reality. Serial's over here with the microphone. Serial's the one who came up with the concept of campus in a company, campus en entreprise ou votre entreprise. So we'll go to a question here.
Hey, Hamoon. Yes, so my name is Norman Valdez, and I'm actually doing the education around AI, and also working on a transformational agenda that Community Foundation of Canada is doing to bring 130 other organizations building an ecosystem around AI, because AI touches everything. It's a technology that simulates human cognitive ability, so it's a very big deal all across different industries and sectors. So definitely we need to build an ecosystem around. My question is this. We all know that there is an opportunity around doing something with AI. We need to get our hands on. We need to think about the micro-credentials, because indeed we can't have these educational models that we have right now. We need to transform them and we need to speed them up to get from A to B. Totally with you on all that. But I think there's a cautionary tale here, right? So one big example, one of the competing AI models right now is Grok. Grok is owned by Ekhtiari, which is owned by Elon Musk. And I think down the road, we need to have very keen considerations about just the values that these technologies actually give out. And do we, as organizations, individuals, align to these values? Because we can't just speed up and go into this process. There are certain aspects that we need to keep in mind: responsible AI, data privacy, data sovereignty, and many other issues that are unique actually to the Canadian landscape, such as indigenous communities, for example, may not trust certain models, specifically the one that I just mentioned. So just wanted to get your impressions about this concept of like, yes, we need to move quickly, we need to do this, we need to embrace the technologies, but there are certain aspects that need to be taken care of and considered before actually getting there, so that we don't actually do harm down the road, thinking about this speed.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's such an important spot-on question for your context. I mentioned we operate in Europe. That means we need to work with GDPR, EU AI Act, some of the highest global standards on these questions. And so we spend a lot of our time thinking about responsible AI. I would have a bit of maybe an unusual view on this one. I think in rooms like ours, when we care about impact and values deeply, one of the things we end up forgetting is 90% of the investment, if not more, of what's going into AI doesn't even think about these things, doesn't even care about these things. And if that's the reality of the world, what are the options we have as the people who do care? One of those options is sit back, criticize deeply all that's going on, and hope that something changes on the 90%. I am not very optimistic on that path. I think we'll just have it run over our heads if we default to only that. And so to achieve the goal you're describing, which I think is a really critical one, my view is we got to band together to build better AI, right? Rather than only worrying about the possible risks, let's get into the messiness. Because as you well know, given the work you do and lead in this space, it is not binary. There isn't good and bad AI. There's a whole bunch of messiness of how do you get into the nuances of how it's delivered, what guardrails you put in, what kind of input data do you use, how do you make adjustments. But I think we've been in the do-good space, in the impact space, those of us who care have been too hesitant to get into building better AI. And I think unless we do that, we'll end up with solutions that are just on the other end of the spectrum. We can do that while accounting for the factors you speak about.
That's an excellent answer, and I'll just add the reason why we have partnered with FutureFit AI is because of that perspective, that our responsibility is in fact our ability to respond and to ensure that we can, as much as possible, provide direction into the effective use of AI that doesn't run roughshod over anybody's rights or principles. Another question over here, please.
Hello, so I'm Younes Ismaili, lecturer and corporate trainer in business and in the use of AI. So my question here is about how can we change the perspective, especially as educators? As I see other professors think that AI is not accurate for students. How can we shift this perspective and instead teach our students how to use AI in the right way? Because AI is being adopted in achieving their competencies, in knowing what they want to do. Because as I see, as you mentioned, students have like one path in front of themselves. So they follow in the program, it has some competencies, but they don't see that they can go beyond that program, that they can be entrepreneurs, they can work in different fields. They're studying, for example, insurance, finance, they will work in finance. How can we use AI to have a better orientation for students to know what exactly they want to do, to anticipate their path, where they're going to be? As you mentioned, if you're going in Uber and then after you arrive to a different destination that you wanted, that won't be a nice thing. So how can you use AI to impact the students positively and to show them how to use it in a productive way rather than using it to answer for their assignments?
Thank you for the question, and Robert, I'd be curious if you've got any insights given all the years you've spent around the ecosystem on the higher education side. But what I would say is just what you're doing, I hear you on other colleagues that might not see it the same, just double down on what you are doing. I think what that looks like is I've seen a ton of lecturers and professors defaulting to use whatever tools you want. I'm not restricting any of that. I care about the quality of what you end up delivering. I'm going to ask you to use a tool, talk about how you used it, and then we can debrief. How did you use it? How could you use it differently? What worked, what didn't? So I would say embed it as you can on your end. The rest will follow from the rest of the ecosystem.
Well said. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We have one right here. We have time for one more question.
Thank you for this session. You've raised so many important points. I'm Donna Smith from Toronto Metropolitan University, and I'm director of the School of Retail Management. I'd like to go back to the three points you raised about values, progress, and efficiency, and I want to zero in on success. I totally agree with centralizing all of the wonderful programs that everybody's working on. How would you measure success, given that there's so many programs across Canada and so many jobs? How do you connect success to all of the wonderful work that everyone's doing?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, because the question of outcomes, we've just been blind oftentimes in this space. Where do people actually end up, and how do they get there? I'll give you a couple of very quick examples. We've done work, for example, with state governments, where we take, when people go through a pathway, we understand who they are without us needing to have their personal information. We connect to the government system to connect to the wage and earn data that the state collects from employers, do matchmaking between those, and are able to then actually fully provide end-to-end outcome data on this person went through these programs, ended up in this kind of job, making this kind of money. That's just one example of how you can actually end up with end-to-end pathway data when you bring in various data sources, both public and private, and that allows us to ask the fundamental success question of what kind of jobs, how much earning, and at what period of time. Another example in Ontario, we work with Ministry of Labour, soon we'll be at the enabling technology for all of Toronto Employment Services. Part of that is that someone comes through, they go through 100+ common assessment question, and at the end, all employment counselors capture outcome employment data. That allows us to use algorithms to say, in the future, what kind of interventions help which kind of unemployed people to best get to the jobs they need. So those are maybe just a couple of quick.
So is eCampusOntario moving towards that system? Like, what is eCampusOntario doing now to measure success?
Our measure of success for our members is to ensure, I would say, three things. One, that you can effectively transition into the future of learning. So digital transformation, we can unpack that. Two, that you can do that in a way that is most cost effective as possible, so basically saving money. And three, we are helping you to generate ancillary or incremental net new revenue. It's not our job to ensure that those programs are quality. We rely on our members to produce quality programs. We see our job as being that aggregator in order to ensure that you are getting people into your programs and those people are getting jobs. And by working with Hamoon and FutureFit AI, we're basically going to level that up and say that actually there's a lot more that we can do when we leverage the power of scale. 53 institutions, thousands of experts, hundreds of research labs, as I said yesterday, 1 million students across the sector in this province, all really interested in working with businesses. And to me, the biggest outcome when we are successful at standing up the campus exchange is to ensure that there's no wrong door for a business trying to find a partner, a willing partner, and those learners are getting work-integrated learning experiences, the employees are getting upskilled, and those companies fundamentally are realizing economic and social and cultural gain by diversifying their markets outside of the one that we used to work with. Anyway, we're out of time. Hamoon, I want to say thank you very much, and thank you for that question. For this, I wrote down a note that you're the reluctant entrepreneur. And I want to thank you for that, because you're bringing such a great human-centered perspective to the work that you're doing. You're a great partner for the sector, a great partner for eCampus Ontario. So please join me in thanking Hamoon.
And with that, we've hit our first break. So as a heads up, in this room at 10:30, we'll have proposing solutions to industry challenges. In the Beaton Hall downstairs, there's Programme bilingue de développement de carrière en Ontario. And in the Novella room, there'll be upskilling through micro-credentials at First Nations Technical Institute. Thank you. So, as I mentioned, there are sessions elsewhere. There are concurrent sessions running simultaneously to this one. In this room, for folks in the room and for folks online, we have proposing solutions to industry challenges, how sectors converged and collaborated to create an innovative micro-credential in advanced manufacturing, featuring Dave Smederly and Joël Deschambault, from Ottawa. So please enjoy. Thank you, guys.